Okay, so I hope you've got the idea now that we're going to test these individual objects. So for the pizza, what do we need to do? We need to check what happens when we create a pizza. So, we store the type and the price. We need to check what happens when we add a topping, and then what happens when we add more than one topping, because the output changes slightly. So we'll check the output of the function getDescription, we'll check the addExtra function, and we check the price. And that will check all of the code. So if you look at scroll this down. So when you're testing the pizza, you need to look in the pizza class, look at the possible methods there are. So you need to basically test the init method, okay, and then the getDescription method, and the addExtras method. And we also need to check that every line of code in pizza has been tested at least once. Okay, and that is now getting more complicated because we've got this for loop here, which runs over all the extras, and we've got this if statement here, and we've got an if statement and else here. So we've got to check. You can't just run this once for getDescription. You have to run it a number of times depending on to capture all the possibilities of how many extras you've got. So here's the whole of the pizza test code. So as you imagine, we put it in a file called pizza_i_test. So that's PyTest will find that and run it. And we put a function called test pizza in this case, and we create a dummy pizza object. Okay, and again, it doesn't have to be real data. We can call it a dummy pizza, and we call it, say it's worth £5. And when we set that up, we first test the attributes. So what do we set up when we create our pizza? So that's this bit of code here. We set the type, we set the price, and we create a list of extras, but that's empty initially. So there's our testing those things. We're testing that the type and the price and the length of the extras is 0. Then we check the methods. Okay, so we check getDescription, and I assert getDescription lots of times because I use it after every time I've added extras. So if I add extra, if you go into the code, notice that addExtra doesn't actually print anything out. Okay. In fact, well, actually, neither does getDescription. getDescription structured description. addExtra just changes the data inside the object. So what we're going to need to do is check that the getDescription matches what we're expecting. So we add extra here, topping 1. We add extra topping 1 again. Now this is you notice we'll use repeated lines to add extra. So topping 1 and topping 1 again, because what we want to check is that this bit of code is working properly. Okay. So we only add an extra to the pizza if that extra doesn't already exist. So if the topping is already in the list of toppings of extras, then we don't add it. So we can check that by calling addExtra topping 1 twice, and then when we add topping 2, that does get added to the list, and the price goes up. So as I mentioned, those repeated calls to addExtra are checking that the code is working correctly, that when you add an extra that's already in the pizza, it doesn't get added again. And that's why I add topping 1 twice on this line. I add topping 1, and I add topping 1 again on this line to check that that doesn't change the output or the price. Notice the price, the description, and the price stay the same after I add the topping 1, after I add topping 1 the second time. But after I add topping 2, then obviously the price goes up because that's a different topping. So, have we checked all the code? Well, we've checked this one here. That does get checked because that has that's checking this with extra. We've also tested this one because that gets checked when topping 2 is added. Okay, because you can see it then puts a comma on to add the 2 toppings into the list. And as I've said, we've even tested the case when extras are already in the extras list. So you can see actually although this is quite a simple class in the sense that it's it's not many lines of code, maybe 20 lines of code. Actually, it's already quite complicated to make sure you've got every possibility. And so writing unit tests is not necessarily the simplest task in the world, and people get employed just for doing this task, and they get good at it because they try and make sure all the possible lines are being run. You can do that with a debugger. Actually, you can, when you're deciding what to test with your unit test, you can use a debugger to check that every line is being hit. Okay, I think that's a good point to finish that video, and then we'll finally, at the end of the lecture, we'll look at the hub tests.